The other side of the road is safe, where we sidestep being bothered and avoid getting involved. But rolling up your sleeves and boldly going where few dare to tread, that's walking through Samaria. Each week on our podcast, we introduce you to the special few who walk in the spirit of the Good Samaritan. On behalf of the Giving Company and your hosts, David Hendrickson and Dan Riveros, welcome to the Walking Through Samaria podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the Walking Through Samaria podcast. I'm your host, Dan Riveros, with my co-host,
David Hendrickson. Hey.
Here we are, man.
Dan.
Still doing it, still rocking and rolling.
We're in proximity. We're in person. This isn't over Zoom.
Yep. We got
teams.
We got in-person guests.
And our guest is in person.
Talent in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's welcome Sam Collier.
Sam Collier, welcome.
Listen, so excited to be here. As I told you, I've heard rumors about you guys. And now I'm in the flesh. I'm going, okay, this is a lot better than I'm just...
Yeah, exactly. We always get concerned when people hear rumors.
They're
always great
all
stuff.
true.
Sam, I am really pleased to introduce you to our audience. So if you don't mind, I'm going to run through your bio here real quick, and then we are going to dive in.
Sure.
It's going to be awesome. Hey, everybody. Sam Collier is a pastor, speaker, writer, and host of the A Greater Story with Sam Collier TV show and radio podcast that currently airs in, get ready, Dan, 100 million homes.
Wow.
He also communicates nationally and internationally as a speaker and contributor regularly at North Point Ministries, founded by Andy Stanley, the Rethink Group, founded by Reggie Joyner, Orange Network, Orange Tour, Alpha International Leadership Conference. We know Matthew Neville and the team there.
Come on.
Global Leadership Summit, which we just had here a few weeks ago, and more. He has also been interviewed on numerous TV shows, podcasts, and radio programs. Sam lives with his wife, Tony, and their daughter, pretty close by here in the greater Atlanta area.
11 minutes away.
11 minutes away, door to door. Sam, it really is a treat to have you here. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with us.
Thank you.
Such an honor. Listen, what you guys are doing around the world and what you've been doing for Christians is just incredible. I've been on a lot of shows. I've done 70 interviews for the book up until now.
Wow.
This is one that I was waiting on. True honor to be on this platform.
That's cool.
And what God has been doing.
Well,
Thank you,
I'm gonna say a personal thank you as well, because both of my kids, we're gonna talk about college in a second, so get ready. But both of my kids went through Inside Out at North Point, and completely changed their direction. And as parents, we just felt like they were in a great spot, and it really prepared them for college and beyond. So really thankful for what you've done, particularly with students at North Point.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's a big shout out to Andy, Reggie Joyner, Kevin Ragsdale, Marquise. I could go down the line.
We know
Darren, they allowed for me to serve in a lot of speaking capacities in those environments, and it really helped shape me, and honor to serve. That's my point. And
well, I got to get one thing out of the way, Dan, right out of the gate.
Ahead.
And it comes up every time.
Get it off.
Comes up every time. So you have a twin sister.
yeah,
What's her name?
Sarah.
Sarah and Sam, twins. She's an industrial engineer, Dan. And when you hear industrial engineer in the greater Atlanta area, what do you think about?
Thinking out of my pay grade, pretty much.
Well, I know this too because my niece is an industrial engineer at Georgia Tech.
Okay.
I think your sister was dual scholarship, Spelman College and Georgia Tech, which is a really cool program. So for anybody in the greater Atlanta area, like that program, I have to say,
She's
is
a genius. She's a
pretty
genius.
sweet. But like, we're dog fans on this podcast, Sam. Like, I don't want to speak for Dan. Maybe he's not, but
What are you, Dan?
Atlanta United. That's pretty much what
he defers.
I like the
He
fights,
nods.
man. I'm a UFC
He nods.
boxer guy.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm a UGA fan. I'll say that. I really am. But if I'm with my sister, I'm a Georgia Tech fan.
You got to root for Tech. I get it.
But if she's not there, I mean, if you're in Georgia, how come on?
right?
I mean, Bulldogs, it's like a religion.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, that's a good start. We're actually having a smoother
go.
start, Dan,
Thanks
than
you
I
guys
thought.
hitting
I
off.
thought it'd be a little bumpy, but we're all right.
I'm sorry to disappoint you.
No,
The
it's
bromance
perfect. Trust me.
begins.
Absolutely
I have
perfect.
a lot of friends that played for UG. Rennie Curran is a good friend.
Oh, that's awesome.
And, so I know those guys. Will be.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. You know who's doing really good work right now is Benjamin Watson. Right? Mm-hmm. I think he's doing great stuff.
Excellent work.
Yeah.
He just emerged.
Yeah. All right. So, in light of you having a twin sister, we're going to get a little serious here because your story growing up it's fairly incredible. I mean, addiction, poverty, it's tough. So, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I think our audience is going, wait a minute, this guy is full of life and energy and laughter and fun and engagement. But, man, paint the picture for us, if you don't mind, of growing up.
Yeah. We're talking about this book.
Yeah.
And this book is about my life. It's one of the reasons why we wrote it, just because of the miracle that God did. You hear about my sister and what she's doing and everything that I've been able to do. It was not supposed to be that way. And so, long story short, our mother, biological mother, she was 21 when she had me and my twin sister.
Okay.
She had 3 kids already.
Yeah.
So that's
So
5
you were 4 and
kids.
5.
Yeah. What'd you say?
You were 4 and 5. You and Sarah were 4 and 5.
Yeah, 4 and 5.
Who came first?
Me.
You did?
7 minutes.
So you're
I
4.
said, I'm coming out.
There you go.
But now my sister's a little shyer than me. So if you meet her, I've got a
It all makes sense.
She's like,
It all makes
I'm an
sense.
industrial engineer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I'm out. Then she comes out, 5 kids, age 21, in the hospital, extreme poverty. Our father had left the picture. Crack, when you talk about cocaine, drugs, substance abuse. Paul, I'm going to put a pin right there and say 3 months ago, to this day, we lost him from COVID-19, my biological father.
Oh, no.
In the hotbed of New York City. And I'm telling you that because he had diabetes and was in the hospital being treated.
Yeah.
He left the hospital, walked down the street to get drugs, contracted COVID-19 on the street, went back to the hospital and died, passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry. That is tough.
And it's all good. I mean, I met him. I've not met him before. I talked to him twice. It's interesting. Every time I talked to him, I knew it was him, which is a weird thing.
Yeah.
But I tell you that part of the story to go back to my mother being in the hospital to let you know how long substance abuse has had a grip on him.
Yeah. Wow.
And he was knee deep in it at that time. So he wrote out, and my mother is faced with a decision. Do I raise the 2 in poverty that I'm already
three
raising?
already.
I
Yep.
can't, I don't have enough money to take care of them. Or do I give them up for adoption?
Where are we geographically? Are we
We are
in Atlanta?
in Augusta,
Georgia.
Gotcha.
Okay.
About an hour from here.
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
That's where my biological father's family
Okay.
was or is. In Augusta, Columbus Hospital, I think was the name of the hospital. And she's got to make this call. So she gives us up for adoption in hopes that everything will work out. I like the Moses story. Sends us up the river.
Yeah.
Hopefully they, don't get sad. We get adopted by a couple who had just met in Washington, D.C. about a year prior to that. And my father, and I'll, I guess, refer to him as my father moving forward, my mother, the ones that raised us.
Yeah.
We get adopted by them. They had just met in Washington, D.C. about a year prior. My dad was in the middle of his second divorce. He was in the laundromat. They met in the laundromat at 3 p.m. on a Sunday. He's walking around laundromat washing clothes in the middle of his second divorce. My mother is in the laundromat walking around for a different reason. The night before, she had gotten hit in the head with a hammer by her husband at the time.
Oh, my gosh.
He was a Black Panther. Now, if you know anything about the Black Panther Party, some of them are a little aggressive, okay? Not all, but many. And so he was extremely aggressive, abusive. So she got up the next morning saying, by any means necessary, I have to get out of this
Get
situation.
me out of this. Yeah.
And so she had a gun in her purse. So she was getting ready to go kill him. So she's walking around the laundromat at 3 p.m. to create an alibi. So if somebody wanted to know where she was,
She could say the laundromat.
I was at
There
the
I am.
laundry. I'm on the camera. That's
Yeah.
where I was. So she's walking around this laundromat looking crazy. And my father walks over to her and starts a conversation, kind of jolts her. Long story short, they leave the laundromat together. They go through with their divorces. She figures out how to get a divorce. They start dating. They go to church, give their life to Christ for the first time. My father at the time is 50.
Okay.
So when he gives his life to Christ.
Wow.
Wow.
And go. No, you go.
So if I got this right, they became believers a year before they adopted.
A year before. And my dad's in the last season, really last chapter of his life, because he's 84 right now. He's 84. And they get married after getting saved and realize that my mother can't have kids, but she's always wanted to have kids. So they come down to Augusta, Georgia, where we had just been given up for adoption 2 months prior.
Oh, my.
So they walk over to our crib, and this is where kind of your statements come back. They walk over to our crib, and they said, we want them. Now, my dad would say we were in bad shape because they didn't take care of it. I mean, a lot of stuff. The lady who's running the home runs from the back and says, you don't want to adopt them.
Not these. I remember hearing you tell this story on one of the interviews I saw online,
Yes.
and I'm like blown away.
Yes,
She's saying, no, not these two.
because of the drugs, because
Yeah.
we came from the drugs. If you look at our adoption papers, they trace a lot of my mother's steps back to a prostitution house. So we don't know if she was prostituting or just kind of living there. But they had written us off. And so because they had written us off, they didn't take care of, and I don't really share this part of the story much, but you know, when you have a baby, you have to bend their legs, you have to take care of them, you have to mold their head, you have to do all that. They did none of that. So my sister couldn't bend her legs. My head was kind of like, they hadn't flipped me at all we talking about 2 months.
Oh my
They were putting Benadryl in our milk. I mean, it was bad. So my dad was like, y'all are in bad shape. And she says, you don't want to adopt them. Where they come from, they're probably not going to be much. And then she said this, in fact, they'll probably be mentally challenged. And so you've seen the movie War Room.
Yeah.
You know about the prayer closet.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
My parents formed their version of what they would call a prayer closet in the adoption agency. And they asked God, what is he saying about us? And they say the Lord says to them, they're going to be okay. These are your kids. They look back at the lady and they say, we want them. They adopt us. Oh, you go make me cry. They adopt us. They take us home. 3 months later, so 5 months, we're 5 months when they took us home. The week of Christmas, we're in Atlanta, so you know about Channel 2 Action News.
Yep.
Channel 2 comes out to the house because they hear about the story 3 days before Christmas. And the headline read, Christmas Miracle, twins have been rescued. Fast forward, my sister becomes an industrial engineer, all A's from kindergarten up to 12th grade, Georgia Tech, dual scholarship. And I'm at iDisciple, the giving company, right? I'm like, what is this? I made it. What are we, in Alpharetta?
What a thing for the agency to say.
What a thing.
Like that.
Yeah.
That's wild.
What a thing.
What a thing to say. Just that blows my mind.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's an unbelievable story. And what do you, when you think about your adoptive parents today,
Yeah.
they're in their later season, sounds like similar age to my mom.
Yeah.
How do you put that time frame? Because you did kind of a fast forward,
Yeah.
but put that time frame into context for us. I mean, it is drastically different than what you would have experienced.
Oh, yeah, it was. I want to say the word night and day, but it's really where you start to, and we'll get to some of this later, but you start to see the difference between nature versus nurture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
That, yes, there are some things biologically you're just going to have from your biological family, but so much of who you become are your choices, right? And it's the sense of stability, the safety.
Right.
And we didn't have everything that we wanted. We had everything we needed. We're middle class. Middle class, black family, grew up on Auburn Avenue.
Yeah. There you go.
And home of civil rights,
Yeah.
birthplace of civil rights here.
Yeah.
My dad had a barbershop right across the street from the Martin Luther King Jr. Center.
That's
with the
awesome.
above tomb of MLK and Coretta Sid.
Yeah.
You know, so we grew up seeing what I would call Black excellence. And so I say that because we never saw our color as a crutch. And we didn't because we were aware of the oppression that our ancestors face and that Black and brown people face in this country.
Sure.
But I would walk down the street and see a mural of John Lewis. Then I would look to the left, I'd see a statue of Hank Aaron. And then I would see the tomb of MLK. And I'm like, wait a minute. These people were people that, in spite of the pressures that they face in life, overcame and became, and did great things. And so we had a sense of pride about who we were.
Right.
Yeah.
That almost the obstacles were an opportunity to overcome and to display strength and to push. If they could do it, we could do it. And that kind of described our childhood because our father, he did not, I'm looking at this glass here with the Giving Company, it says inspire, value, excellence. It was all about excellence. It was like, if we did something that was above average, he acted like it was normal. So I'm playing 6 instruments by 10th grade.
Wow.
And he's going, yeah. What else were you going to do?
Let's pick the 7th.
100%. I always say, he always told us it wasn't about the cards you've been dealt. It's about how you play the hand. It's about how you play the hand.
Yeah.
So it's not about yesterday. It's about today. Yeah. What are you going to do today with what God has given you? Are you going to make excuses? Are you going to live out of this sense of abandonment? Or are you going to live out of being chosen and seeing the opportunity you have? And so he always pushed us. He never let us think about the dark circumstances in which we came.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to do one more thing on adoption.
Please.
Because, this A Greater Story, which is your book that you released on August 4th, is, it's got to be an inspiration for so many. The name of this podcast that Dan and I co-host is Walking Through Samaria, and it was birthed out of an experience that Dan and I had in Ethiopia, where Christian and Muslim leaders got together for child protection in Ethiopia. And we were blown away because we were like, this is the picture of the Good Samaritan. Samaritans and Jews, back at the time of the parable in Luke chapter 10, were at odds with one another. And yet it was a Samaritan that Jesus made the hero of the story, because the Samaritan wasn't like the priest or the Levite that just walked on by, like a Dionne Warwick song, right? He went to the other side of the road and he took care of someone who was beaten and left for dead. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about adoption, and we've had Beth Guckenberger from Back to Back Ministries on here, Shane Windemeyer, I think, was adopted.
Yep. Yep.
Can you maybe just touch on how meaningful adoption turned out for you and Sarah? And more importantly, how can the church be better Good Samaritans on that really important topic or initiative called adoption?
Wow. Yeah, I am. I just started working with an organization called Chosen, which does a ton of work with Angel Armies, Chris Tomlin's foundation.
Oh, yeah.
But Chosen, it focuses on helping kids that have been adopted in foster families. And so I'm just like reading all these stats and all these other things. One of the things that they say, that one of my mentors always said, is that every kid is one loving adult away from being a success story. Every kid is one loving adult away. And loving, I think we define loving as consistent, sacrificial.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I think the listeners of this podcast will understand somewhat of a Christian ethic, that a Christian household, so on and so forth, morals, all of that. Every kid is one loving adult away from a success story. And for us, that was our story. It radically, and we'll get to the rest of the story later, and it'll come out, I think, in a greater way. We talk about what happened on television and some other things.
Yeah.
But it radically changed our lives. I go back to nature versus nurture. It gave us vision. It gave us a belief. I used to do a lot of work in the inner city here in Atlanta and around the country. We had a nonprofit up in Harlem here in the inner cities of Atlanta, Alexandria, Louisiana.
Wow.
Did some things in Shreveport. I mean, Augusta, up in Charlotte. And one of the things that we noticed when we would talk with families and students that were living in poverty and going through different things, people would always ask me, what's the number one or top two things that really helps rescue a kid out of poverty? That really, is it money? Is it opportunity? Is it vision? Is it, whatever it is? And I would always say the number one thing that can pull a kid out of that type of situation is belief. Belief and vision.
Yeah.
The idea that you can see beyond where you are, that you can believe. And then
It's not just a here, there's a there.
There's a there.
Yeah.
Hope, 100%. I got a friend who grew up in Nairobi, right outside of Nairobi, in some of the poorest parts of Kenya. He grew up in a hut, mile to walk. He had to walk a mile to get water.
Yeah.
All of it. No electricity. I mean, it's what you think about when you think about extreme poverty. Yeah. It's what people use when they say, well, how could God be good if, right, people are living there and I'm living here? And he runs one of the largest nonprofits in Nairobi right now, but grew up without anything. Yeah. And when I sat with him, I said to him, what was the difference between you and your 8 brothers and sisters? Because he said many of them are still living in extreme poverty. He said, it wasn't someone that came and rescued me. It was one, I got saved. And after I got saved, I just believed there was more.
Yeah.
I believed there was more. And so I reached higher. Our parents gave us a sense of belief. They gave us vision that you can be more than what was said about you. We always knew that we were counted out from the beginning. They always told us that. But it was never to keep us down. It was to inspire us that you can rise above those words. So we talk about this idea of adoption. More than stability, what kids need are parents, people in their lives that are saying you can be. And not just once, but consistently. That's where the adoption and the foster care, they need someone else speaking those words. The Bible says, as a man thinketh, so is he. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So much of that is, can you see beyond where you are? Can you reach for more? So you're going to get me. I could go for 3 hours on this.
At what age did that conversation come that the cards that you were dealt weren't what everybody else's was? Like, how old were you when you found that out? Man, did the talk come at the same time to you and your sister, or did it happen separately?
Man, it was as far as I can remember, I think I remember back to about 2 years old.
Dag. Early.
I can't remember this morning.
Well, my dad, and this is why it was so, and I don't know if they did this on purpose, but they used movies for a lot of stuff. And I think for us, like, they always made adoption cool. It was always this thing. It was always, hey, you're adopted. We were like, we're 2. So it was like, what's that?
Well,
It's like,
whatever.
Well, we don't think your mother could take care of you. We think she was poor, but now we're here, and it was just, So when they tied it to like Disney movies of like, we're the hero, it's like we were rescued. So we felt chosen. So there was this thing of like, so we went to school telling people we were adopted. We told people like, we're adopted. And the other kids that were adopted were like, us too. And the kids that weren't went home and said, can we be adopted? Right? It was this big thing. And so I think over the years of us just knowing and the way we discovered it, it wasn't this real dark thing. It was this chosen thing. It just became, it was really a badge of honor almost in a sense. And so we always knew that. We always knew.
Well, we got to talk about Steve Harvey, right? As part of this. So not Family Feud, not Miss Universe, but somehow you got to tell the story because I don't know the details. There's a recommendation or something to meet your biological family. Yeah. And this happens on Steve Harvey Show?
So you talk about my parents, right? And we talk about adoption and loving adults and the difference that makes in a kid.
Yeah.
So around 24, I'm 32 now. Around 24, we're doing a tradition that we have. It's a little different from your tradition, but very similar. NFL football. NFL. Yours
that's
is
okay.
college.
That's all right. Yeah.
But
That's
ours
good.
was NFL.
Yeah.
And so it was Sunday afternoon. We're back on Sunday again. Everybody, we got together. Me, mom, dad, sister, Sarah, and we watched football. Now, there was one rule. Nobody talks during the game. Do you have the same rule?
No, but I can't imagine not talking during a
My dad's
football
like,
game.
nobody, because, we're distracted. We're like, he's like, watch the game. So there's maybe some shouting, but no, besides that.
Falcons fan? Is he?
Oh, yeah. Well, he's Atlanta everything.
Through and through.
Yeah, we could be losing, which Atlanta sports has been disappointing. It's up.
Yes.
Can
It's
we-
been a little tough to swallow as of late.
It's like, almost. He doesn't care. He's like Falcons, Braves. When we had Thrashers.
Yeah, that's right.
You
That's
remember
right.
Thrashers?
Yeah.
Now we got United.
Yeah.
I haven't been to a United game. I need to. Anyway.
I haven't either.
You're going to get me
Come on,
distracted.
Dan.
Side note, you guys are really missing out as Atlantans. That's
I know.
disappointing.
Well, we
Like,
need something
like,
that
that's
will
what it
win.
Is it rowdy?
the energy that's brought to the city, just like, wow. Wow.
I got to go.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're watching Falcons.
Okay.
And my dad breaks the rule. And he starts talking to us.
His own rule.
He's from the country. Not all country people are loud, but I'm sure you know people. He's loud, extremely loud. And that loud is his normal volume,
Gotcha.
So he's yelling at us, but he's talking normal in his volume. And he's like, you need to go find your biological family. He just starts out of nowhere.
In the middle of a Falcons game.
In the middle of the Falcons game, we're like, and he's like, well, you could grow up one day and marry your cousin and you would never know it. Like, what? You could marry your sister. And we were like, you've lost your mind. He said, and
I guess that's possible.
and Steve Harvey is going to help you do it. And I said, you've lost your mind.
Yeah.
And so what he explained, what I later found out, so he's in this barbershop. You ever seen, I don't know if you've seen a movie called Barbershop. There's a movie called Barbershop,
Yeah.
like the black barbershop, what it means to the black community.
Yeah.
You do the same thing in the black barbershop. So he watches TV, eats, talks trash, and yells.
Yeah.
And takes some naps sometimes. So he's watching Steve Harvey every day. And he says the Lord speaks to him in the middle of watching Steve Harvey one day that Steve Harvey was going to help us find our biological family. I said, I just thought he was crazy. So he convinces, I get up and leave because he's yelling at us. I feel like he's gone crazy. I'm like, you talking about Steve Harvey? You don't even know Steve Harvey. He convinces my sister 2 weeks later to write into the show. So I call her. I'm like, why did you write into the show? I'm like, she's like, well, he kept yelling. Because she was really kind of the one that was iffy. Like, I was like, he's crazy. But whenever my dad would talk about going to reunite or she would be a little like, why do we need to do that? And so I'm like, why did you write in? Like, of all people,
right,
you don't even want to, I don't care. And she's like, they're not writing us back. That's not going to happen. Ellen's not going to, Steve, Oprah, nobody's writing you back. And so a year goes by and my phone rings. It's my sister. I answer. I say, hello. She says, the Steve Harvey show just called me. They're going to call you. Bye. And hangs up the phone. And I'm like, what? And hangs up. My phone rings again and literally back to back. Hello? Hey, this is Dorothy from the Steve Harvey show. This is my first week on the job.
Oh, my gosh.
I used to work at Jerry Springer. I'm like, what? Why are you telling me that?
Yeah. Maybe leave that
Let's
detail
leave that
out.
with detail. And she said, well, there's 100 stories that they put on my desk. Yours is the top story. We think we can help you find your biological family. Do you want to do it? Let me call you back. Call my sister. I said, do you want to do it? She says, no, but I feel like, we have to. Like, this doesn't happen, but I don't want to do it. They fly me, my sister, my parents up, and they say, we haven't found anybody. But we want to bring you on the show to make a plea that maybe one day they would show up. So we run through these lines, and I never tell this part of the story, but you go on on the talk show. If you're not like Celine Dion, they're running through the lines with you.
Oh,
They've written them, so they want to make sure you don't sound crazy. And so we run through these lines. So we think they haven't found anybody. We go on to introduce us, go to commercial break, come back after commercial break. Steve Harvey says, hey, welcome, we're back. I know we told you we didn't find anyone, but that's not the case. Your biological mother is here. Eleanor, come on out. And we meet our biological mother for the first time on national television.
Being shocked, like that wasn't the expectation.
No, it wasn't the
right?
expectation. And he says, and your 3 brothers and sisters are here, which we didn't know we had. Same mother, same father. National TV. Crazy.
So how did it go? Was it?
Do you like that when that happens? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what is the feeling? Like,
but
I
your
don't
dad wanted this.
Our
Like
dad
he
wanted
encouraged.
it. That's
he
why I
encouraged
talk
this.
about the power of
Yeah.
of strong parents. Like
Yeah.
he was leading us in his mind. In order to maximize where you're going, you need to know where you came from. And so he said, "This is the time to do it." And he was really wise in that.
Yeah.
Because and I don't, people, there's debate on this, but for me, I was glad that I did it when I was 25, not 15 or
Yeah.
not 9.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't mentally
sure.
ready.
Yeah,
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it was, I don't want to use the word difficult, but it was complex for me to even process it emotionally at 25.
Yeah.
So I imagine 15, you're still figuring out who you are, your identity, all these other things. But you ask how it went, I think, it was wild. If people watch the show and they can Google Steve Harvey and Sam Collier to pop up. I just put my head down when she walks out because I'm staring at her. I'm frozen. I'm just frozen. And so it looked a little wild because I'm just like, looking. And I'm like, okay, let me put my head down, get my act together. And you asked, did I like it? It was so many emotions.
Yeah,
I was
I'll bet.
happy, sad, angry, surprised. What do I feel? And I heard the voice of the Lord say to me, we got to deal with this later. You're on national TV.
Yeah.
You got to get up and hug her. Like, this is your biological mother.
I don't think I would
Yeah.
like the surprise element
Right.
from the TV crew
Yeah.
and all that. I don't think I would like that. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think walking into the situation, I'd be like, well, there's a possibility,
Right.
this is what you came here for, was to meet. But I don't like the deception part of it.
Yeah, right?
That freaks David. Don't
Man.
ever surprise me on the show. With
Don't
something
ever
crazy.
That's right.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah, I mean, we dealt with it a little better just because people kept telling us, don't let them, like, they probably found somebody. They're not going to bring you to Chicago.
Yeah.
So we were a little
true.
prepared. I think had we not been, it would have been like, okay, what is,
Yeah.
and so I snapped out of it and embraced her. Embraced her.
Yeah.
And
That had to be healing for her, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I think so.
Yeah.
She said, her first words were, we've been looking for you and, been praying for you. And so I definitely think, because I imagine, what I found out later, she tried to come back and adopt us a year after she gave us up,
Okay.
Oh, wow.
which it just wasn't in the Lord's will.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're glad. It was,
Right.
And the reason that we're glad is because after the show, my brother pulls me to the side. He's maybe 2 years older than me. And he said, hey, I know you may feel like you missed out on something, but I want to let you know you didn't. There were days where we went 3 and 4 days without eating.
Without food. Yeah.
And we
Jeez.
were so hungry, we were shaking. Our mother sold drugs to take care of the family. She had at least $5,000 worth of crack on her at all times. I mean, they were living in a war zone. And so he was like, you didn't miss out. God rescued you.
Do you know if there are any greater stories with your siblings? Any great? How did your siblings wind up? Like, any,
in an attempt to honor them, I will say, my brother is, I think he just got his master's.
okay.
He's a teacher. He played ball. So he is the typical black boy out of the hood sports entertainment
Sports helped get him out.
story. Sports
Yeah.
pulled him out.
Yeah.
He played ball, went to Ball State.
Muncie, Indiana. Come on.
Yeah, like was great.
I won't talk about Indiana, Dan. Don't worry. Don't worry.
But
Wow.
barely made it out
Okay.
because, all the men in my family dead in jail selling drugs or on the run right now. We lost my granddad, biological, who I found. And I'm finding all this out like 7 years ago.
Yeah.
We lost him in prison. He had a double life sentence for killing like 3 people.
Yeah.
That literally me and my brother, the only men in my family. And so he barely made it out, only because my mother and my uncles, biological mother, uncles, refused to let him sell drugs. Refuse, like they would, like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Barely made it out.
Wow.
Barely made it out.
Well, I'm thankful for that. That's good. That's good to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, you're in like 1 billion households through TV and radio, and we've got to get to the essence of a greater story because I want our audience to hear it directly from Sam Collier. But we've talked about adoption and the criticality of the environment.
What a word, criticality.
Sorry, I don't know where
was
that
excellent.
came. I don't know where that came.
That was
from.
excellent.
Anyway, but environment matters, and Dan and I were just talking about this because I'm from Chicago. I used to be a young life leader in Cabrini Green, and shout out to Peggy and Alvin Bibbs and everybody that I was a young life leader with. But I observed the kids who grew up in Cabrini Green with an appreciation that I'm thankful for at a very young age, like proximity matters, right? Like I could have just as easily been born in Cabrini Green, Robert Taylor Homes, wherever, Augusta, Georgia. You know what I mean? Like environment, proximity matters. And so this adoption story and because of our affiliation with Family Christian that has really embraced widows and orphans and adoption and foster care agencies. We had Chris Pulaski from Bethany on. I mean, we've talked about this a lot, but I want to talk about another tough topic because I think you've got some wisdom here. Before we talk about a greater story, the book and the TV show and the podcast, et cetera, and that is the race issue.
Yeah,
you've been a good voice for this as of late, and if we could just talk about kind of where we're at today, which is we've got a divisive election, we've got a global pandemic, and we've got more than one could ever imagine stories of police killings of young black and women and young black men and women. And it just feels like the country is more combative and more divisive than it's ever been. And we've had Lee Jenkins on this show, and I've heard you talk about this topic a bit.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth because I want our audience to hear from you first, and then hopefully we'll lean into this. But maybe in the context of the Good Samaritan, how can Christians, how can the church be salt and light and good Samaritans and good neighbors when it comes to this really tough issue that I'm 53 years old and I'm still learning about, right? From folks like you and Lee Jenkins, et cetera. What would your advice be to Christians, to believers about what we should be doing right now to help in this area of racial injustice, systemic racism, just the divide between the races right now in this country?
Whew, what a question. I often refer to the season we're in as the double pandemics.
Yeah.
COVID-19, Black Lives Matter, civil unrest.
Yeah.
However you want to frame it. I spend a lot of time with Martin Luther King's daughter. We do a lot of work together. Been with her for a long time. Before, when I had my nonprofit, we did a lot of work with the King Center. So studied Dr. King for a really long time.
Yeah.
And often talked to his daughter about where we are today. And that is, and beyond that, grew up in the Black church, spent a lot of time over in the predominantly white church.
Yeah.
And have seen what some people would describe as success in both of those arenas. And so I say all that to say that is where my opinions are coming. That foundation is where my opinions are coming from.
Big, what you would say, successful African American church.
Yeah, about 25,000 members.
Huge, right?
Yeah.
Big, successful, probably predominantly white.
When I got there, it was
church.
predominantly. It's changed now.
Yeah, in Alpharetta,
and it's getting
Georgia.
better, right? But I mean, Andy would tell you.
Yeah,
it was white
but
when I got there.
This is good context to have for the conversation.
I call it the Christian gap. when I got there.
Okay.
The store, Gap, Old Navy.
There you go.
Okay, you're with me.
Yeah.
So out of that place, I form my opinions, and that's
good.
why I've gotten here.
And I want to throw one more data point to our listeners before
Please.
you answer. And I did the long preamble. My apologies. But I heard you on an interview, I think with Sam Morocho. Your first your first white friend, age 21.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Carry on.
Yeah, I think all of that's important because I think the biggest, and my second book after this with Baker is going to be about race.
That's good.
I'm going to lay
People
out.
need to hear from you on this.
Well, it's funny because as I was writing this one, or when we were promoting it, I was like, man, I should have switched it. I was just like, I should have switched it. My first one should have been race. With all that being said, I think the biggest thing, the reason I think that all of that background is so important in this conversation is because it communicates a perspective that is rooted in experience and in proximity. You talked about proximity before.
Yeah.
It's one thing to talk about the divide in the races and only have experienced life with one race. And that's one of the main reasons why we keep going wrong in this conversation, because few of us have spent time on both sides.
Yeah.
And have truly been in relationship with people that are different than us. Whether you are a minority in relationship with the majority at a high level. And I mean, when I say relationship, I don't mean when it's time to come to dinner and have the hard conversations. I mean, are you hanging out together? Are you having fun together?
Right.
Are you talking? Can we push pause on the race conversation for a minute and just talk about some other things, and let's celebrate birthdays and what's going on with your kid? That's relationship.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
White leaning into on the other side.
Well, and I'm going to interject one thing, which is when Dan and I went to Ethiopia and we saw Christian leaders and Muslim leaders, right? So this is different. The two biggest worldly faiths, they do the same thing. Christian leaders and Muslim leaders were going to one another's kids' birthday parties. Christians were building mosques. Muslims were building Sunday schools. Like, Dan and I are like, you have got to be kidding me. Like, this just doesn't happen. If they can do it, right? Like, can't we be doing better in the U.S.? I don't want to be too preachy, but I mean, that was our experience over there, right? We were blown
100%.
away.
100%.
Well, you're 100% right. And the same principles that they had to walk through are the same ones that we have to walk through. And I think it starts with proximity. But when I'm thinking about this next book, I'm thinking about making it about the posture for conversation. Because I think in many cases we're putting the cart before the horse in this conversation. And in other words, we're trying to have the conversation before we develop the posture in which we should have the conversation. And the posture is, am I okay with people that think different than me? Am I okay with hearing opinions that I vehemently disagree with? Do I have a sense of I could be wrong?
Yeah.
Because if we don't have that on both sides, then we're walking in and we're almost doomed from the beginning. Yeah. If you're walking in going, there's no way I could be wrong, prove me wrong, it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
If you're walking in with, if you say something I don't agree with, I'm going to destroy you, it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
But if you can have a posture of humility on both sides of going, there may be something that I'm missing.
Right. Yeah.
Then what will happen is it will create the context for you to hear something maybe you've never heard before. Here's an example. People, during this time, it was a dark time over these last couple of months, right? I mean, it was crazy. It was crazy online.
Not good.
And I said there was nowhere you could have stood in the conversation and not get hit.
Yeah.
Everybody was getting hit. If you were quiet, you were going to get hit for being quiet.
Yeah.
If you were too left, too right. In the middle, everybody's attacking you.
That's
so
right.
it was just
That's right.
So it was a dark, but I was more encouraged than I ever been. Now I did have a breakdown 3 weeks into it, which we can talk about later. After I got out of the breakdown, though, I was more encouraged than I've ever been in the conversation because here's what started happening. My black friends were calling me, and they were saying, and I'm not talking about the 10%ers. I think there's 10% on both sides. That's just like, all right, we don't need any of y'all.
You're not.
Right? I mean,
you're not helping.
You're not helping.
You're not
There's
helping.
10%. I
Yep.
hate you, and the other side I hate you.
Yeah.
Let's put those over there. But the vast majority of people on both sides, my black friends were calling me and saying, okay, so it's not that they don't care. It's that they didn't know.
They didn't know.
And then my white friends were calling me and going, I think there might be more to the conversation than what I thought.
Right.
And just those little moments, my counselor always says, when you're changing a behavior, it's not the massive changes that change it. It's the little 10% turns that you make that over time you look up and you're in a whole different place.
Yeah.
And it's those little moments. I was like, okay, here we go, because the posture changed. My black friends were going, all right, I see you differently now. Now let's talk. And my white friends were going, maybe what Dad told me was not what I thought.
I'm gonna share in front of all of our listeners, Dan and you and Sam. Like, I feel like everybody brings, you mentioned their experience. I would almost say maybe their biases to the table. And I want to tease out a couple. We had Pastor Jay Stewart and Pastor Derek Hawkins from the Refuge in Charlotte on the show, merging of a black church with a white church right before the Charlotte race riots in 2016. Incredible story. They were like, it's all about relationships. Like, nothing gets better without relationships. We had Lee Jenkins on the show. He said, nothing gets better unless we're in relationships. You said nothing gets better if we're in relationships. There is a movement underway that is, hey, David, you're a white 53-year-old straight evangelical male. Just go sit in the corner. This is not about you. You don't belong in the conversation. And so I feel like my bias is towards your message, Lee Jenkins' message, Jay Stewart and Derek Hawkins' message, because you are saying, hey, David, you get to hang out. Like, you get to be a part of the conversation. You get to come into my house, into my room, into my world, and ask some uncomfortable questions that you wouldn't ask on Twitter or on Facebook, right? Like, because it's got to be. So my bias is probably inherently towards that solution, that it's got to be about relationship. Mm-hmm. Is that just because it's the only solution that I'm invited to?
No, and the reason I agree with that is because, and I'm going to break it down in a different way. From studying Dr. King, it is relationship that solves everything. And here's what people demonize that sounds too soft.
Yeah.
When the solutions are much more complex, right? But let me flip it on its head and take it on this side. The relationship is what leads to the systemic change. And this is what I tell you. So you take the 60s, you had the protests happening. And what people don't know is, because they don't study Dr. King, they don't read. But the context of why they were protesting, okay, you got 6 steps to Kingian nonviolence. You got 6 principles of Kingian nonviolence.
Yep.
The steps go in this order. Information gathering first. Gather all the information. Next, education. Go educate people on what you've learned. 3rd, personal commitment. 4th, negotiation. 5, direct action. 6, reconciliation. With all of that being said, the biggest steps to look at in the middle of that is negotiation, direct action. So they tend to go hand in hand. You only go to direct action, and direct action is in violence because it's Kingian nonviolence, it's protest, to get back to the table to negotiate. You only protest if you can't negotiate. In other words, we're talking, we can't come to a common ground. I can't get a meeting. You won't change what you believe. We can't solve the problem. Okay, now I got to protest to gain awareness so that we can get to the table. They protested so the media would put it on TV and they could get back to the table. The big thing in that story is the table.
Yeah.
What table? Well, he had to sit down with the president. But here's what people miss. When the laws changed because MLK became friends with the president. If he wasn't friends with the president, if he didn't have that relationship, then now we're protesting to get nowhere. Now we're just protesting, but we don't have a strategy. But then also, we don't have the relationship for the law to even be changed and to be written.
Yeah.
The relationship is everything. And here's what, especially today, the reason that the relationship is so important today is because the civil unrest, the issues that we face in this country today on all sides are much more nuanced and hidden than they were in the 60s. It was very, and even before.
Yeah.
It was very apparent. Okay, white only restroom, black only restroom.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
The problem. Okay,
Yeah.
police are sicking dogs on black people. We got it, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
fire
like,
hoses, right? Like, not good.
okay,
Yeah.
we see it, right?
Yeah.
Today, it's like, okay, so where is it exactly? Okay, you talk about systemic oppression. What does that mean?
Yeah.
You talk about this. What does that mean? And I always describe the problem as there were a lot of. We're now living in the residue of the overt racism. We're living in the residue of it. And what you're doing is now we have to finish the job that was started. But it was started, and it's so difficult to get to because it's residue. It's all over. But in other words, you don't really know. It's like, okay, how do I do this? And you have to spend so much time philosophically helping everyone understand why certain systems have to change. Here's my last statement about this. I'm going to throw it back to you.
Okay. That's good. Love it. I'm soaking it up. That's good.
My last statement about this is the reason that relationships are so important is because the people that have the power to actually change things most likely are not in relationship with someone of a different race. We have to come together because it really the changes that we need now are coming from somebody signing something, hiring different people, doing this, shocking a system. It really is a personal change. So I could go for hours.
Oh, that's good.
Does that make sense?
Yes. It makes total sense. And here's one of the data points that Tony Evans gave us a few weeks ago. Dr. Tony Evans, he said, well, we found this out. The reason he got to speak at NRB, the National Religious, which is a stodgy old crowd, right?
Yeah.
Was Dr. Dobson. His relationship with Dr. Dobson. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Really? James Dobson all those years ago? And he said, yep, that's how I got on the radio. And I'm like, that's a nugget. Let me tell you my other bias real quick that you can respond to. And then we got to talk about a greater story. So
we are talking about that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. I am forever thankful for growing up in Louisville, Kentucky. I was bused downtown 1979, 1980, 1981, volunteered to be bused downtown the second year because I enjoyed it so much. I played a little basketball. My career peaked, I think, at 8th grade as the third point guard coming off the bench of my middle school team, just to be clear.
Point guard.
I was the only white person on my high school cross country team my sophomore year, so that would have been 1983. Worked in Cabrini Green in the early 90s, championed diversity and kind of my corporate work before getting into nonprofit work 5 years ago.
Wow.
So this is my other bias. Like, where have you people been? Right now, I didn't get it right, and I'm learning today, and you guys have taught me a lot about you do need to walk in someone's shoes and really understand what their experience was before you pass judgment or make an assessment or cast an opinion. But I see all these people yelling at each other on Twitter and on Facebook and all that, and I go, are you really part of the solution? Because, like, we've been around this for a while, and I've been involved with it for quite some time, and I'm supposed to listen to you because you're yelling at me on Twitter. Like, I don't I see a lot of arguing and a lot of blaming, and I don't see a lot of solutions from the newer, younger people who are saying, I'm the problem. Right? Is that fair, or am I being mean?
Yeah. No, I think to that point, I think that we're seeing that happen everywhere. I mean, it's white people are yelling, black people are yelling. You don't really hear Hispanics yelling too much.
Yeah.
You're not listening. 'Cause they're yelling.
Okay.
They're yelling.
Okay, Hispanics are yelling. People, everybody's yelling. And so I think that the problem is the same on all sides. And here's the problem. And I always say this, there's a difference between being called to the work of reconciliation and participating in it.
Yeah, it's good. That's good.
And
yeah.
The reason
be clear, right, on which one is for you, and go do that.
Because
yeah,
I always tell people
that's
this.
Good.
When minorities come into a lot of the white organizations that I serve in different places, they always call me first. It happens. He's always called me first. I call it the minority meeting, the black meeting. It just happens. Yeah. Hispanics call me, Asians call me, black people call me. They just call me like, okay, talk to me. Like, give me the real. And that's the comment. Give me the real.
Yeah.
And I always say to them, if it's a predominantly white organization, there's a difference between it predominantly and it being multicultural already and all these other things. If it's predominantly white and they're one of the first or few, I always say to them, don't take the job if you don't feel called to the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they go, what do you mean? I said, well, you're going to be frustrated 3 months in because it's not going to move as fast as you wanted to move.
Yeah.
It's going to be frustrating at times, and you're not going to have the patience or the stomach to, lack of a better phrase, fight through what needs to be fought through in order for progress to take place. That's not an excuse for speed. That is a wake-up call on reality. It's going to take time. If you're walking in this environment because this thing is so philosophical and intellectual. And so one of the reasons the 60s there were people yelling then, but it went a little better because there was a lot. One, there was leadership. We're living in a time and in a generation where we don't like.
It was tangible, like you said. It was really tangible back then.
Really
like you
tangible.
said, there was really solid leadership.
And people followed people back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
In this generation, millennials do not want to follow anyone. Yeah. It's like, yeah, I got it. I'll take the advice that you got. Yeah. But one person, who we following? Well, okay, LeBron, thanks. I'll follow you. Okay, wait. It's like, that's good. Then I'm done with LeBron. All right, now I want to follow them. Then I'm done with them. Okay, Andy, I'm going to listen to you. Yeah. We don't like the one. And that's
Taylor, throw a little Taylor Swift in there. Right?
Taylor, I'm going to follow. Right? And it's just this buffet of leaders that were just like, okay, I'm going to take a little bit. But nobody wants to really follow anybody.
Yeah.
It's difficult to trust.
What'd you say?
Difficult to trust.
It's difficult to trust.
Good.
Martin Luther King would describe it as the drum major instinct, that everybody wants to be the drum major.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be in the band.
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit of the issue with why because we really need a concerted
Everybody
effort.
has a platform today.
Everybody.
Right? Like
everybody has a platform and everybody's laundry can be exposed.
Yeah.
So, leaders back in the day, maybe some of their laundry wasn't exposed. We didn't have their social medias. We weren't in tune to every little aspect of their life. Because somebody can be a great leader in one way and then have something else in the back that we don't really agree with. And then it disqualifies them completely.
Yeah.
We could go down that road for a long time.
Yeah.
It's true. So I think the lack of, I don't even want to say the lack of leadership, but the lack of followership makes it a lot more difficult for us to actually all get on the same page. So it tends to happen in silos, and each organization kind of has to take their stance and da-da-da-da-da. But my point was, because there was leadership, there was also training as well on how to actually be and what to expect. And right now, I think we have a twofold problem of people not fully identifying with if they're called to the work of reconciliation or if they're just participating, I think there's a discrepancy there. And then there's a lack of training because of a lack of followership. And so that's some of the mud
Makes total sense.
that we find ourselves, you know. And so I think here's my solution. We got to find the people that are called to the work and partner with them.
Yeah.
And there are people in the white community that are called, and there are people in the black community and the Hispanic and all around. How do you know you're called? There is a sense of patience. There's a sense, and patience doesn't mean a lack of urgency, but there's a sense there's like, I can sit in a conversation with a far right, let's just say overt racist white person and let them ask a crazy question and not curse them out. You know?
Well, and this is where I want to put a ribbon on this conversation, which is I so appreciate the Sam Colliers, the Lee Jenkins, the Tony Evans, the Derek Hawkins, who show grace. Because look, some of the church environments maybe that I was a part of didn't intend to be racist or support racism, but weren't aware, or, I don't even know how to talk about it. But the fact that you all are willing to say, hey, David, ask your questions, or let's develop a relationship and let's talk about these things. I mean, my awareness, even as somebody who has the background that I have and that I've tried to articulate, I've got so much to learn. And I read America's Original Sin at the request of Lee Jenkins. And I mean, I was blown away at the data around prison sentencing and the justice system and sort of what happens there. And so my eyes have been opened in my 50s to things that I wasn't really aware of. And it's because you all were willing to show me some grace and say, let me walk with you and let's figure this out together.
Well, I think that's just such a big point, and I want to encourage that because I think for our white leaders that are in a season of wanting to learn, wanting to come out, I think you have to find those that are called and commit yourself to that particular narrative and to that audience.
Yeah.
Because it's going to give you what you're looking for in this season and help you, while also understanding and knowing and giving grace to minority leaders and minorities that do not feel called to that and are just experiencing the sting of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the tension, because I spend a lot of time with white leaders and they're going, like, we had a great conversation today, but then tomorrow they run into somebody who does not have the patience and they're giving up the next day, and they're like, well, what about that? I'm like, hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah.
You got to understand you're getting raw emotion. You know what I mean?
Right.
What you have in us is abnormal for what the reality of the minority, your average minority that is experiencing oppression in America. You're getting abnormal. Don't spend your time over there.
Yeah.
They're going to destroy you.
Yeah.
But come back over here and let's work together.
That's good.
We got to get the reconcilers together.
Well,
man.
I just want to call you out as a good Samaritan, because you have said you are participating in these conversations, in some cases with people who are overtly racist, and you're still walking across the road saying, I think I can provide some good influence here. And that's what these conversations are all about. Before we let you go, Sam, let's revisit your billion households for a second. In all sincerity, A Greater Story, television, radio, podcast, now a book, NRB TV, DirecTV, Apple TV, Roku, Soar Radio, Art Soul Radio, iTunes. You can find A Greater Story with Sam Collier. But I want to kind of end on the book. So, book's been out for a month. Tell our listeners what they are going to experience by picking up the book, A Greater Story. What are they going to experience as readers of that book?
I think the biggest message, and first of all, thank you for talking about all that. I think the biggest message is, a biggest takeaway, God is still in the miracle business. He still can take a mess and turn it into a miracle. And in this season of COVID-19 and civil unrest and all these things, we all need that. No matter if you're Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, we all need to know that God can take our specific mess and create the miraculous out of it. That we can maintain a sense of hope. He is with us. This isn't the prosperity gospel. People will hear that and go, well, God is a genie. No, he's not a genie. It all depends on what you define as a miracle as well.
Yeah.
For many of us, we think it looks a certain way. When I'm saying miracle, I'm saying that God can move in your situation and put it on track with his will. And for many of us, that looks like him moving the mountain, which he is. I don't want people to lose hope on that, because a lot of people, when they go deeper in faith, they tend to be black or white. It's, well, either God can do it and he always does it, or he can't do it at all. And it's like, no, that's not. We got to learn to live in the middle of going, God does not always heal the way we want him to heal, but that doesn't mean he doesn't do it at all. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't give him the opportunity to, because a lot of times he will move that mountain for you because it's in his will. But then on the other side, be prepared. If he doesn't move it, he will give us the strength to make it through it. And that's a miracle. That's the miraculous. God can take your mess and turn it into a miracle. And God is a God of growth. He wants things to always get bigger. We know that when we hear about the talents. And he wants to maximize it within his will. I mean, we're sitting in the office now of the Giving Company and iDisciple and so many amazing brands. God has grown this. That was in his will. If he wasn't about growth, we wouldn't be here. And so he wants to do the same thing in all of our lives. That's the main message that people will get from it. There is a greater story for us. And we list out principles on how people can connect their story to his story so it can lead to something greater. A meta-narrative is, you get to learn about what it means to grow up Black in America.
That's good.
Because we do spend a lot of time, here are the things I learned. Here's what I had to overcome. Here's what my mentors taught me. That is kind of a meta-narrative that you just kind of get as a byproduct. It just happens. And so it's half teaching, half story.
Love it. That's good. And I mean, God is a God of growth. This has grown through TV and radio and podcasting. And my understanding is you're experiencing and telling other people's greater stories as well, right? So God definitely is still doing miracles today, because you're hearing about and engaging in all these other stories in addition to your own.
100%. That's the goal of the show, the podcast, the television platform. We want to grab people that are living in their greater story. In other words, they've cracked the code. That all of us, we all have an opportunity for that. I told you about my friend in Nairobi. Right? He cracked the code. He reached for more. God met him. Faith without work, so on and so forth. And so we grab these people and we go, take us from the beginning. How did this happen? And the stories are just incredible. I imagine if I would have flipped this podcast and go, all right, David, tell me, right? Take me from little David up to up to giving. It would be a crazy story.
Well, and I would frankly support your assertion that it's a miraculous outcome. I mean, if people heard my story, Dan knows, other people know, like, I'm not great at telling it because it's messy. And people would go, no way is this part of this guy's story. And I absolutely put it in the miracle category. Meeting my wife, doing the work that I've been able to do, meeting the people that I've been able to meet. Absolutely, I would put it in the miracle category.
I'm charging my story for $59.95. If you'd like to hear it, message me.
Right. Come on. But God wants to do that. I want people to hear. He wants to do this miracle thing. All right, anyway, go.
Well, one other thing. A Greater Story is not your first book, so I heard about Find Your Voice.
It's kind of my first book.
Find Your Voice, right? that you did for students.
Yeah, we did it for the Orange Conference, Orange Curriculum audience.
Yeah, it's good.
And
that's good.
A Greater Story is like the first major.
Yeah, awesome. And you got another one coming, so thank you for the insight there. And I think you will be a terrific voice for these really tough issues around race in this country. So I want to encourage you there. All right, tell our audience as we wrap, how can they get their hands on the book, and how can they get their hands on you digitally, right? Which is what's the digital way they can follow you, connect with you?
Man, Amazon is the best. You guys
heard of it? Amazon.com.
Amazon.com.
Amazon.com, if you haven't heard of it.
Just launched in the UK yesterday.
Yeah.
London.
Amazon.co.uk.
There
There we
it's available
go.
in Australia.
Yep.
It's available wherever you are. We tried to activate the international audience as well so they can order it, get the audiobook. I did it myself. I almost died trying to do audio. Have you ever done an audiobook? Oh my gosh.
But I appreciate when authors do it. So
Yeah.
I
Is
did
it you?
Oh,
Is it
yeah,
you
it's
as
me.
the
It's
audio?
me.
That's
It's
nice.
me.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that. You said it was like a 7-hour sermon.
yeah, but that's tough. Did you do it all at once?
I did it in 4 days, which was a bad idea. I should have did a chapter a day.
Oh,
Yeah,
there you
Because
go.
it is.
Yeah, no, that's tough.
It was
That's
really
tough.
hard. So they can get it anywhere, audiobook, physical book, hard copy, all of that. So
Awesome. And then finding you online, what's the best way to connect with
Instagram,
you? IG,
or
All
just
right.
Google Sam Collier. I'll pop up Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that.
Awesome.
And
Sam.
hopefully we'll do some more together.
Sam, thanks for being
that'd
on,
be
man.
good.
You're probably one of my favorite guests, I
This
think.
is really,
This is one of my
really
favorite
been
conversations. Thank you.
terrific.
Thank you.
You
Can
took
you-
your max down for
That's
me,
what I'm
Dan.
asking. I felt
Okay.
comfortable. He's like, let's get the real thing.
How long did it took? It took 55 minutes. But
55 minutes.
Dan took his mask down a little. We're still distanced, just so everybody, don't call the police on us or anything. Hey, Sam, give a little departing word to our audience, if you don't mind. So, Walking Through Samaria, we talk about good Samaritans like Sam Collier, who frankly know what it's like to be on the other side of the road and have somebody walk your way like your adoptive parents, or for you to be the guy who's walking across the road because you're helping us with understanding how we can help kids, or how we can be productive in this issue of race, or how we can tap into our greater story. Leave our audience, if you don't mind, with one word, one phrase, comment about a greater story and how they can get on that path.
Yeah, I think one of the things I would say right now that is so important, we always say that the road to a greater story is through surrender. So surrendering your will to God's will every single day. The story I'm reminded of, especially in the midst of COVID-19, is when Jesus is in the boat with the disciples and the storm breaks out.
Yeah.
And he's asleep. Seems like we're in a storm right now all around our world. And
we're scared.
And we're scared.
Yeah.
And we're screaming at Jesus the way the disciples were, in a panic. Where are you? And notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, are you okay? He doesn't say you're going to be okay. He says, oh, ye of little faith. And what he's doing, he's creating the priority for us that in that story, he's like, hey, the Messiah is in the boat with you. And if I'm in the boat, you're going to be okay. When will you believe that I'm with you? And that's what I want to say to people out there, that in the midst of the storm, Jesus is with you.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't calm it, which he can, so give him the opportunity to, he will give you the ability to make it through. Don't lose hope. Keep going. And I believe that you'll discover the greater story God has for you.
Danny, there it is.
How do you top that?
Yeah. Outstanding.
Awesome.
Sam, we cannot thank you enough for spending so much time with us today. I know you only had to come 11 minutes from your house, but you are welcome anytime. This has been an absolute treat. All our listeners, get your hands on a greater story. Just go to Amazon.com and get the book. Danny, why don't you wind us down, buddy?
Get that audio book. Why not? He's put on all the word for it.
There you go.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us again. I am Dan Riveros with my co-host
David Hendrickson.
and our special guest,
Sam Collier.
We had a great time. Hope you guys enjoyed it. For more content like this, visit us at givingcompany.com. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Walking Through Samaria.